I'd like to welcome everybody. We've got a special treat today. We've got my dear friend Ian Sharpe, coming to us from Sydney, where it's now Saturday morning. And
It is.
Nico has stayed up until midnight in South Africa for this. So thank you both. And Sharpe, it's all yours. The question I was going to start with is, how
Yeah.
did you first experience or encounter the 4D system? And you can take over the shared screen anytime you want.
Yeah, sure. I've got a few. Thanks, Charlie, and Nico. Thanks for being up so late or very early, depending on your point of view too. It's lovely to see you again, my friend. And
Won't
one of
miss this for anything in the world.
well, and I've got a few prompting slides to help guide us through the questions and also remind myself. Let me just share my screen. Take a moment. And can I confirm, can everybody see my screen
Yep,
okay?
you got it. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
good. I'll just do this full screen, so you should now be able to see that. And I think that's a really good question, Charlie. You know, how did I first find out about this? There's two things you got to know about me, folks. One, I'm a big old space nerd. Anything space, I'm in for it. I'm interested. I have a lifelong sense of curiosity about why things are the way that they are. And the biggest question of all is about the universe, our exploration, our place in it. You can take that in many different directions. I'm not going to bore everybody with my personal view on that, but
Sharpie,
this
why don't you tell them what they hear on your phone?
about the sorry,
What the message on your telephone when you call? What do you hear? Is it still there?
um,
Used to be
do
John
I
Kennedy.
sorry, Charlie, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm having a difficulty hearing you.
Your telephone answer used to be John Kennedy.
Oh, the yes. It used to have the Kennedy prompt in terms of man of the moon by the end of the decade,
Yep.
um, or humanity, as we say now. But that's a really good insight about level of interest and passion. I'm interested in many things actually. I'm just naturally a very curious person about the world. But this is actually about 4D. The other thing, I didn't know it at the time, but little spoiler alert, I turn out to be a green. I'm a cultivator innately. I didn't understand this about myself, but I was really interested in how people worked. And my original university background was actually in philosophy of mind specifically, not psychology, not individual behaviors. How does this work? How do we process and conceive the world? What does that mean? So that naturally makes me very focused on people. And I got wind that in 2010 there was a conference in Queensland in Australia where there was a guest speaker coming up, this Charlie Pellerin guy. And I knew of Charlie and Hubble, but only very, very remotely. And through what I'd read about Hubble and how NASA builds teams was coming up. Well, you can imagine this lifelong interest in space, this lifelong interest in people come together perfectly in this. So I had to be there and I was fully committed. I'm going to use a little 4D language here. I was fully committed to being there. And my boss really had no choice in that matter. And I convinced her that I was going to be there and why and how. And another colleague of mine from Melbourne, I'm from Sydney, said he was going to be there as well. And that was fine. This is important in the story because how I found out and first experienced 4D was a really 4D way. So I got to the conference and there was a long queue when you were registering at the conference. The conference organizers had made a mistake. Somebody in the back office had stuffed up something, and many people's sessions that they were registered for was wrong. What did that mean? It meant by the time I got to the head of the queue, the poor people who were checking in people were beaten down, they were tired, they were exasperated, they'd had person after person after person who was really frustrated with the conference organizers. And of course, they're the face of the conference. It wasn't their fault. And I'd been listening to this conversation about 3 or 4 times, and the person who was on the floor organizing this, her name was Sarah. And Sarah was standing over the shoulder of the person who was putting in all the registration details and fixing these things. And I thought, I've got a choice here. I'm pretty sure my registration's stuffed up too. And it's going to be frustrating for me. Okay, I know it's coming. What am I going to choose to do with it? And I thought, I didn't know that I was going to do this in a 4D way at the time, but here's what unfolded. And I started with some appreciation for the poor person who was entering into the results. I said, it looks like you're having a really frustrating morning. How are you? And she said, her shoulders just slumped. And she said, we've got a lot to get done here. And you're registered for this and this and this. And I said, look, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Here's my piece of paper. This is what I'm signed up for. And she said, oh, okay, here's another one I've got to fix. I said, it's okay, you'll get to it. And Sarah, who was standing over her shoulder, was a lovely person, as it turned out to be. But the boss is standing over your shoulder. It doesn't help with pressure when you're in a crisis. So I said, that's okay. Can I give you the bit of paper? You have a look at that. Sarah, can I have a quick word with you for a moment? And just took the boss away. And I said to her, how are you doing today? And her shoulders slumped and she said, oh, I've had enough. Wait till I get back to the office. And she said a few other things, I'm sure you can imagine, from frustration. And I said, look, it's going to work out. This is frustrating. This is a moment, but it's going to be okay. I'm really looking forward to the conference and thank you for your help. Well, that moment I'd finished speaking, the lady who was helping me said, there you go, Mr. Sharpe. There's your details. Is that right? I said, perfect. Thank you for sorting that out. Didn't think anything of it. It's just manners. I didn't realize at the time that I was actually using a bit of authentic appreciation. It wasn't haps, but it was in the spirit of it. Didn't think of it. Went away that afternoon, listened to Charlie stand up on stage and talk about the fifth force, and I went, I get it. I get it. Yes, I can see what's driving our behavior. And that was it. Then this is the opportunity to meet Charlie later on. And I thought, I've got to meet this guy. I really want to say hello and I want to, learn more. And I got talking with a colleague of mine in the reception area. And before I knew it, we were late to join the queue to meet Charlie. We're right at the back of the queue. I'm the last person in the queue. And Sarah, remember the ground manager, comes past and she goes, oh, um, Charlie's also giving out books, but yeah, can you guess which book? Um, but I'm sorry, you two are the last two in the queue, and we run out of books in the third last position. And I said, that's okay. I'm going to buy the book anyway. Thank you for letting me know, Sarah. It's not a problem. More importantly, as the day improved, and she said, "Oh yes, it has. Thank you very much. You were the only person. There's no superpower here on me. You were the only person who said thank you for sorting things out." And there was about 500 people at that conference. Can you imagine 500 angry people coming at you in the morning? So, and so I said, well, I'm really sorry that I was the only one who did that, but thank you for sorting it out. It's great. I knew it would be. I thought, that's it. And she looked at me, she looked at my colleague, and she said, Charlie's going to do a second speaking, meet and greet tomorrow. And we've got a few books put by for that. Don't tell anybody, but I'll go and get you a couple of books now. And I said, well, let's be fair, so long as we're not depriving anybody else. And she said, no, absolutely not. So that was it. And that's how I first got to meet Charlie. That's how I first got to meet about, understand about 4D. And I'd heard the Fifth Force. And I got to meet Charlie, and Charlie very kindly signed my book as well. And we had a good conversation. But the tipping point was that was reading How NASA Builds Teams during the conference and then on my flight back the following day. my colleague who was with me at the airport, remember the colleague from Melbourne I said also wanted to be there, and he's got his copy of the book too. And he's going, I'm really going to do something with this. This is really important. I'm in. And that was true. Unfortunately, that was as far as he ever took it that I know. I hope he took it further. The difference was he said he was in, I was in. And that's the difference when you see that translation to action. And that's what you see fully committed in behavior, not words. So the the gist of this, my biggest aha moment I've ever had in my life. Remember I said I didn't know I was a green? Well, I'm on the plane and I'm flying back down from Brisbane to Sydney. It's under an hour's flight. It's not much for anybody who's not familiar with it. And I'm reading the innate foundation piece. And I'm thinking, this is a quick exercise. I could do this right now. So I went through and found my preferences, between intuitive and sensed and so forth. And I was going, yep, mentally, here, little tally in that. And I said, before I started, I said, I know how this works out. I'm a visioner. I'm a strong blue. I know how this works out. Remember that curiosity about the world? I know the answer already. I don't need to do this, but it's going to be interesting. A very blue thing to say. So I go through this exercise and I go tick, 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 green. I think, there's a problem here. The problem must be me. I was like a speedboat through the exercise. And when I went through the exercise, I went through it too quickly. I'll do it again. Tick, 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 tick. Green. Not green by a little bit. Green by a lot. Intuited has 7 out of 7 ticks on it. There's no sense at all. Not really interested in things as they appear to be. It's what they mean. I don't. Yeah, okay. But of course, between emotional and logical, remember, I'm a professionally trained philosopher and I have done philosophical logic. So I'm naturally crediting myself with being a logician too. But what I hadn't understood was it was about the way you make behavioral decisions. But no problem. I did it for a third time. I thought, I know the problem. I misread the instructions. I'm answering the questions, but I've got the wrong context. Denial is not a river in Egypt. This should sound familiar to everybody. The third time I did it, green. And I suddenly realized in that moment, I went from understanding the exercise to understanding myself and reverse engineered from that point in my life all of the way back and suddenly understood why every time I was involved in helping people, I felt joy. I was fulfilled. I could sustain it. It worked for me. And every time I was involved in an intellectual exercise, I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. And I realized why I stepped aside from an academic career. I had been registered to do my PhD in philosophy. I loved it here. I didn't love it here. It wasn't sustainable for me. And that was an aha moment. That's a significant emotional experience, a C for me. I can close my eyes and tell you what seat I was sitting in. And the epilogue to this, long story, but it's so important to the whole foundation of everything here, is I got off the plane. I waited until I had signal reception. I pick up the phone and I say to my wife, Savannah, when I answer the phone and she finally answers, do I say, hello, honey, we had a great conference. How are you? I don't say any of this. I said, oh my God, I'm in the wrong job. And she said, have you been drinking? And I realized some more context was appropriate, and here we are. So that helped reframe my entirety of how I saw myself. The answer was simple. There's no such thing as turquoise under 4D, but I am a strongly overdone intuitor, natively and naturally. So naturally, I would see myself as blue. The problem is I'm actually strongly wired to focus on cultivating people. And I hadn't really realized that about myself. And that's why I ended up in the career I am today in terms of a transformation program director. So there's authentic appreciation and finding a shared interest in a conflicted situation and a personal, significant emotional experience, all arising from an innate foundation in one.
Nice.
And that's how I first encountered it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
There's a few thoughts, Charlie, from your prompting questions. I thought it'd be useful to touch upon. And look, these are prompts. I'd love for us to all have a dialogue around this. The things that strongly spoke to me, I've talked to most of these. Probably the key thing is it is the only system I have ever encountered that gives you a standard for behaviors that everybody can understand. If somebody has difficulty understanding what making and keeping agreements is, you have a bigger problem. 4D isn't going to cure that. So, and having that standard in a way, it really it appeals to people who are very, personal focused, the cultivators and includers amongst us. It also really appeals strongly to the people who are on the other side because it's a standard. You can measure it. You can see you're here, then there, as about that. And it's an objective sitting back as part of it. So that was really, really quite a strong feature. I have dealt with many, many, many persona-based, and 4D is not a persona-based system, in terms of, I'll call it pseudo-scientific, pseudo-psychological fluff. Fluff is a very polite word for it, where you get an insight, and Myers-Briggs is a classic example of it. You're this in that box. There is no call to action. There is nothing you are informed to do about that. Yes, there is sometimes tools that say somebody's this type versus another type. Here's how you can meet in the middle. A little bit shared interest, but the reality is it's often cryptic and really hard to get your head around. So that practicality and empirical basis for 4D strongly drew me. It strongly spoke to me. Remember, curious mind. And I like things that work in the real world. None of the others have. So I highlighted some points on the slide because I like that really forensic look at this. And I've already talked about the denial moment with the innate foundation for myself. But the tool set that goes along with it as well is really powerful. So I don't go and train people in 4D. I use it in the context of my teams, my clients, my organization as well. And of all of the tools and pieces, setting aside TDAs and IDAs, the hands down most powerful one has been the context shifting worksheet. I have seen it shift people from a place of aggression and an almost hopeless contract situation to a place of starting to actually listen to each other. And I've got a couple of examples that I'll share about that, but I wanted to get your thoughts about this. Charlie, is this hitting on the points that you wanted to explore?
Perfect.
Great. And Nico, I'm hoping that this is keeping you awake. This is interest. You know this as well as I do. I'm hoping this is interesting for you too, because there's aspects of the story you may not know along the way.
No, look, I can assure you I'm using all of this, the 4D stuff. I can specifically remember certain concepts. And even today, I spoke about deviance, rationalized deviance. I think I spoke twice about it today in different situations, you know?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I love it. Great. I've often, Charlie, I've often stolen your phrase about normalization of deviance from Diane Vaughan actually being incremental stupidity.
Yeah.
Everybody everybody in Australia and New Zealand understands that concept. We all look at it, and we often look at other people doing it, never ourselves, of course.
Right, of course, yeah, not us, no.
So yeah, it could never be us. We understand this concept, so therefore we're not prey to it. And of course, then reality dawns. Um, I think there's another couple of things that are spoken really powerfully. And to anybody watching this, from my personal experience in working with clients, actually helping them understand. A lot of people, especially HR organizations, have used different tools and models and things to profile people, to work with coaching. And having done a lot of executive coaching, I think there's a couple of key differences and challenges I'd like to share from my experience, and I'd love to hear from your experiences, either now or, of course, through the channel, through commentary, or reach out to me. I'm always interested in learning from others and what we see and do. Others see things we don't. Um, I talked about the real world observations before. And I think one of the most powerful differentiators is it's not a 360 assessment. That 360 assessment of above and between and below can often give very artificial results. And you have to have a high degree of trust in reality that what you're providing, especially on an individual development assessment, is actually helpful and actionable. Otherwise, you get nice, soft soap feedback like, Charlie's a great guy. That happens to be true. What do you now do with that, Charlie? You just say, I keep on being me. There's nothing actionable for improvement. And the most helpful feedback I've ever had through an IDA has been from one guy included, who, in talking with him one day, I blew my top at him, absolutely lost control. The fault was mine. The trigger was his, but the fault was entirely mine. I subsequently apologized to him as a result of it. And he was the person who gave me the most helpful feedback through my own IDA. And I think if you are serious about being involved in leadership, you have to be open and receptive to any feedback, whether you agree with it or not. This has been a very powerful mechanism for doing that. And in the team perspective, what I've experienced is that teams realize they're not rating each other. That's where they immediately go because they're so soaked in other mechanisms that do this. They said, think of it this way. If you're standing in a circle and we're pointing at this thing called team in the middle, that's what we're rating. What is our common experience of that? And they go, oh, okay. Actually, I feel a bit safer now. I don't have to comment at all. I can choose to comment, but now I'm much more likely to comment. I found just that clarification raised commentary in team development assessments massively because they didn't have to say Jeff did, Janet did, or does or doesn't. It was that common shared experience. And of course, that's what we want to get to about it. Anything else that generally is where somebody really wants to say something, quite often when I've been working with teams, somebody's taken me aside and said, I didn't put this in the TDA, but this person, blah, blah, blah. And it's almost always one of the 7 deadly sins. That team is always in the red. It's always pointing to one of the 7 deadly sins. Every single time I'm taken aside. And I take that as a gesture of trust when somebody will talk with me about that. That says that I'm doing at least enough to create that trust so somebody can go, blah, blah, blah. And it has been me in the past. Got better. And that measurable progress piece, again, there's no point in measuring a thing and going, that's nice. What do you do with that? That's useless in the real world. You're going to measure a thing and do something with it. Being able to translate that into actions, really, really powerful. And Charlie, another helpful question you shared was, how much have I integrated this into my personal life? Entirely. Have I mastered it? No. It's a lifelong challenge. Okay. Am, you know, am I further along the path than when back in 2010? A long way. And so some of the things that I learned, remember, I'm an overdone intuitor, that I learned personally about it was if you go in as an overdone intuitor, you have fantastic conversations with other overdone intuitors. You talk about ideas and big concepts, and everybody else who's at the other end of that spectrum. And it is this continuity here goes, do you want to come down from the clouds? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But how? But how? But how? That's my clue. If somebody's an overdone sensor, they go, but how? But how? But how? And you go, yeah, yeah, that doesn't matter. We've got to work on the right thing first. Don't worry about the how. And every time I find myself saying that, I go, there you go again. Bring it down, think it down. So, in terms of make it grounded, make it rational, make it structured, because they're going to really relate better to that. I only speak my language. Well, that's fine for me. It's fine for anybody else who thinks the same way. The problem is, or the joy is, not everybody does. And I've had enormous career success, which I attribute 100% to 4D. Now, Charlie, you've heard that from me before. Nico, you probably haven't heard that before. I was mid-range consultancy. I've worked for a number of major US global consultancies in my time in my career, and different organizations to different clients, including the privilege of working with NASA, thanks to Charlie's very kind invite to second year at JPL and a number of times, and and with another team who was a challenge outside of JPL, outside of NASA. Charlie, you're laughing because you remember it well. um, good folks, very challenged context. I'll put it that way. And I found that probably the key example of it. I was working for Western Sydney University at the time as the Director of Business Transformation, and I just joined the university and COVID hit. I lost my program manager for the person who was leading a big enterprise service management enabler. We lost all of our contractors. We were about 9 full-time resources down. We had our staff. Our staff were concerned. I was concerned what was going to happen about that. And our vice chancellor at the time, Barney Glover, did a brilliant thing. He said, now's the perfect time to really look and how do we improve all of our services to staff and students, and where do we start and what do we do? And he fully committed to it, which was brilliant. He could very easily have said, flip the off switch, we'll do it later, but he didn't. He fully backed it. He was very, very visionary, and not just in the blue sense. So we then had the challenge where I had to take the reins of the program myself. We had to get this done. I had to form a team virtually. None of us were face to face. Some of us kind of knew each other. And 4D was the key thing I used to be the glue. That program team, I want to stress that, the team success, not mine, delivered that program a little late. That's understandable with COVID. They did more scope than they set out to do. We were able to accommodate more and make a major saving on the budget as well. That wasn't just a saving because we weren't paying for certain contractors. That's because we were able to create a very strong partnership ecosystem. We had delivery partners who were working with us. These are normally competitors. We got them working in shared interest and being fully committed and addressing unpleasant realities and clear about when they said they would do a thing, they were entering into an agreement, and that I was okay if they couldn't keep it, if they told me why, and had thought about making that agreement for the first place. And in short, you could see all of 4D involved with that. People could relate to it. And I had one phrase, it was simple about it. There is one team. There's not Deloitte and CSA as the organization was, and the university, and. There is one team. Here's what we're doing. This is where we're going. This is why. If you've got a better idea, I want to hear it. It's that simple. We just keep on repeating, repeat. Attention goes, power flows. It works, folks. Um, Definitely made me a better person. I'm still married. In fact, I just had my 23rd wedding anniversary the other day. My wife Savannah says she'd be out for now. If she'd killed somebody, she'd have had time off for good behaviour. She'd be back free. She's got a life sentence now with me, as it seems. So memorable moments. Well, seeing my own progress, especially when I stumbled and how I thought I needed to recover. Um, Absolutely, Charlie. Every single time we've worked together, wherever it has been, all of those things are a significant emotional experience for me. Everyone. And I'm going to take you back. Do you remember the moment in one of our first workshops when the team had a comment where one of the new members of the team said, I want to understand what this anonymous comment about retribution free really means. Do you remember that moment?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that team we were working with, we got them to write down on index cards if they thought of something they would call retribution
Oh yeah.
in
Yeah. I
their
remember this.
organization.
Remember this very well. You did an interesting exercise with them. Do you remember what you? I'd never seen this before. Close
Yeah.
their eyes and raise their hand. You remember this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We got them to write down on the index cards
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they would call as an
Yeah.
example. Don't put your name on it.
Let me give a little more background to this. But what happened?
Sure.
We had some feedback. I think maybe in the overnight cards where they said you can't tell your truth in this team without fear of retribution.
Yeah.
And the team leader got up and said that doesn't happen here. And
Yep.
Sharpie, at that moment, you took over the workshop, which I'm happy to see you do. And you said, here's what we're going to do. Everybody close your eyes nice and tight. Everybody got that. Now, if you've ever had this happen to you, raise your hand. And almost all the hands went up. And
Including the team leader.
and you said, okay, put your hands down. And now that you've done that, get out 3x5 cards. Let's write down when this happened. And it was just rich
Yep.
and stuff everywhere. And I don't think the team leader ever quite recovered from that.
No, but to the credit of that team leader, they really listened. And we
Oh yeah.
gathered up those cards.
Yep.
They were anonymous, and we said, would it be helpful to read out a few examples? There's no naming of names here, but a few examples so everybody's really clear what that concept of retribution means. It's going to mean different things to different people, and the team leader and the workshop and with your blessing, of course, thank you, Charlie, said, yeah, sure, we could do that. I read those cards out. I can still close my eyes and see their faces. They weren't a broken team. This was not a team in the
No,
red,
it wasn't.
but
No.
this was a team under high pressure. And sometimes people think of things one way with their actions, they're experienced in a different way. And that wasn't just about the team leader, let's be clear. It was about some behaviors that were becoming the norm. And reading those cards out, you could have heard a pin drop.
Mm.
Charlie and I had them. They were absolutely focused.
And also,
Nobody was in India.
what I remember about this that struck me was an awful lot of it was the emotional side, people feeling abused by the blues.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was. And the police were going, I don't know what you're on about. It wasn't intentional, from my
Yeah, right.
understanding.
That's right. No, it's just the behavior was interpreted that way.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a really good point, Charlie. Years later, I was working with a client, and I got this guy was a 1D blue. And I got this very short email back from him in response to a question. And if you'd said it in person, the way I read it, there was going to be some kind of a punch up involved. It was very, very blunt.
Yeah.
And not the person's real name. Let's say they were called Jeff, not their real name. I emailed my then boss at the time and I said, "What's this?" Yeah, I wanted to say a lot of other things. I was good head of steam built up. What's this? And he said, "Welcome to Jeff." And it just made me laugh, and it took all of the heat out of it. And I got that it was a structural thing with him. He was a 1D blue. He there was no interest in people at all. It was all about the right idea. And I realized I was talking with him in the wrong way. And once I understood that, I actually ended up building a really good working relationship with him. It took a lot of effort from my side and almost none from his,
Yeah.
but it worked. So yeah, that and and there was one time when I mentioned before, I saw a very, very dysfunctional team. It was fatally damaged. This is not any of the teams or organizations we've mentioned, um, but actually working through with them, the TDA helped them realize that they needed to disband. It was a project team, and that if they continued, it was not only not going to work, it was going to do fatal career damage to the people associated with it. It needed to be pulled apart, it needed to be redone. And for the team leader and that team and their organization to have the courage to do that, I take my hat off to them.
Mm.
There was a there was a larger broken context in play that was just smashing that team against the rocks, and they were never going to recover from it. There was no way back. It was, if we'd done this earlier, we maybe,
Mm.
but they were just too brutalized by it. And of course, biggest memorable moment, Charlie, you mentoring me. And I'm deeply appreciative to you. It has made a profound difference in my life, in my ability to understand and shape how I do things as well.
Yeah.
And that's a very great gift. I'm deeply appreciative of. It helped me personally. I would suggest I wouldn't have been married for 23 years had I not shifted
I
myself.
remember these rough moments well. Yeah.
Yeah, I could well. Can I put it this way? I may not be living today, but I'll skate away to thicker ice. And one of the last things I wanted to, just touch on here is about what I've learned. Um, I have worked with 4D in a client sense and services and workshops and TDAs and IDAs, all of these good things, utilizing the tools within 4D in many different capacities. I'm not selling 4D as a service in my current role, but what I'm noting is it's integrated in what I'm doing in terms of major transformation programs. And that's included things like transforming enterprise services. It's included things like um, helping an airport work through what is the future of their baggage handling system and how do they accommodate to a very volatile, very, very complex industry in aviation and the world. We're all in that. So it's integral to what I do. And along the way, I've had some insights, and I would love your perspectives, Nico and Charlie, and also the perspectives of anybody who may watch this. This is the truth of my experience. It's not the truth. But what I've found is it's super hard for some people to actually understand team social context. We get it. It's intuitive. It's obvious. So the thing that drove me crazy for the longest time was, why isn't it as intuitive for everybody? We're all human. We're all affected by this. And my thought is, what I this is my working view. You don't think about breathing air, you just do it. It's unconscious.
Right.
And you don't, most people don't consciously think about team social context. They just respond to it because they've been raised since they're this high. Do this, don't do that, go back and apologize, clean up that mess. You're taught it by action. to respond. And then you learn the right actions and you just respond in context is with this. And I was talking with a friend of mine, Charles, and Charles is on the spectrum, and Charles had a really interesting perspective. He said, I have to learn this. I have to read cues to know when to do the actions as well. Charles is a super smart guy and a lovely guy, but he gave me the clue into it. He said, I have to consciously think about it. And he gave me the example of, he said, I know how to breathe there. I just breathe there. I just do it naturally. I don't think about it at all. I just do it. When it comes to responding in the social context, I have to think about it. And he said, this has been really helpful for him because it's given him patterns and standards that he can use. And I think that that's the challenge with some people not seeing social context. What do you think?
Spot on. Spot on, man. I'm with you there. It's the same, I have the same experience.
The beautiful thing
Yeah.
is when people do get it and you see the eyes light up.
Yep, that's
Nico,
right.
what's your experience?
Yeah. Well, this is so part of my life in the field that I'm working with. If you think about my country, Ian, is the country with the highest level of inequality. Now, how do we talk about social justice in a
Yeah,
country with the biggest gap of inequality?
yeah,
So what I often do, because if you make a statement, it can be threatened and so on. They're not committed always in the context that I'm working to a process like this. So I focused on questions, asking questions to create that kind of awareness. But
yeah,
we can talk about awareness, we read books about awareness, and then we
yeah.
live totally ignorant to awareness. So how
Mm.
to raise awareness? I use questions a lot, in my context.
Yep, that's a great idea. It's almost a Socratic method then, Nico.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep,
It
that's
usually
a good
leads
point.
to follow up reaction, and then people get curious, and then you can start explaining when they start asking for it.
Yeah,
But it's a different context than a professional team in a corporate environment, where I've also been working for many years,
yeah,
where they are committed, they pay for this. This is a totally different context. You have sort of a voluntary buy-in to your message. And
yeah,
when they can express that, it's more meaningful than me telling them, well,
yeah.
this is what we need to look at.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's that. I guess that's kind of to the second point I've got on the slide, which is, talk about your experiences. Write down a few things about the best team you've ever worked on, or if you can't think of one, write down things about the worst. Don't know names. What was your experience like? Where did that come from? Tell me more about that. I guess I'm doing the same thing, but yeah, it's not until people see it themselves um, that you get this thing, this fifth force that does affect us. And I think part of it is there's you just breathe air mindset, you just respond mindset. But I think most people don't actually understand what humanity is, that we're a social species. It seems like such an obvious thing. I mean, cities, places, homes, families, workplaces, right? You don't get any of it without that social dimension as well. But it's actually the glue. And I found it's one of the biggest risk determinants when you use the bell curve. And even if I don't talk anything else about 4D, and I show the bell curve and said, here's the first 500 teams who've gone through that. At the red end, this is what the behavioral experience is like. This is what it's like to be in that team. I don't talk about the green end. Said just at this end, if you're in that team, I give you all the time and all the money in the world. How confident are you that team can deliver? And people instantly say there's no way that team ever delivers anything. Said, okay, so what we're actually addressing here is a team performance risk. If you were in the green, it's no brainer which team you want to be part of. If you're at this end, and this is what your daily experience is, of course you'd rather be in that than the other one. If you give that team all the time and money in the world, we're not guaranteeing they can deliver, but you have an increased likelihood of delivery. That's the fighting chance team. That's the team who can really move mountains. And by the way, if you were, do you know where your team is on that? And most people go, probably somewhere in the middle. Said the mere fact you've said that, I think you're probably a bit better. Want to find out where you actually are? And that's the try it. And I've found that's a really useful approach. It's not my approach, Charlie, that's pinched from you, of course, but it's really useful when people reflect on where they think they are on the scale and not what they can do about it, just where they think they are. Just that very simple inquiry. And that's really my point about there is one thing that teams of the red usually deliver. It's a headache for everybody, including members of that team. And folks, when you're working with this stuff, don't ever assume that a team of the red is stuff full of red people in terms of broken, low hopers, no hopers, not competent people. They may very well be. There are times when you get that, but the majority of people want to succeed with what they've got.
That's right.
And they try to, but if we don't address this, how are you going to succeed? So those are the key points that I wanted to share from my experience and just see if this resonated for people.
Beautiful, Sharpie. Thank you.
As
My pleasure.
something I would like to add, Ian.
Yeah, please, Nico.
Sometimes in many situations, people are not paying me. So I'm not contracted, so I can't actually lose anything as well, but sometimes I've noticed that I can come in like, dropping a bomb, come in straight with a statement.
Yep.
And how many times it happened that afterwards people said, I was so angry, I was so upset with you, There was this one woman who actually told me, I just thank God that I never have to see you again, that kind of thing.
Harsh.
So sometimes the moment is right, and then you have to react on your intuition, and you
Yeah.
just drop a bomb. And most of the time, luckily, I must say, after the dust has settled down, they will come back and there will be some sort of a connection. And it amazingly led then to, wonderful relationships. Okay, so I just got to live with it that sometimes you can lose someone, but for some reason, it's not like I'm doing it daily. It's like a couple of times, but completely the opposite from a soft approach and getting people
Yeah.
to come out of their corners. So I was just thinking of sharing that with you.
Yeah, I like it, Nico. There's definitely a time to be direct. It can be really confronting for people.
Yeah.
But sometimes people need to be confronted. One of the wisest things I've ever been told by my wife was, regardless of the facts, you still have to deal with the way people feel. That was a very powerful statement, and it's true. It turns out facts and logic don't work unless you've got brains and ears, paying attention to them. Unfortunately, we see a lot of this around the world, and that's when I realized that stories will almost always beat facts unless you're doing empirical research. If you want to persuade, you can't beat a story with fact. We see it all the time in politics, all around the world. It's not endemic to any one part. You can only beat a story with a better story. and the better story connects the facts in a way that that person will listen to. And sometimes the story can be really confronting.
Sharpie, one of my stories I used to tell about you in the workshops, I'd like you to relate, is
Sure.
getting the seat on the overnight flight from Australia.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. So I was flying across to LA on the way to Pasadena, and I got into the airport super early because I like to get myself sorted, settled, no rush, no stress, no fuss. That's just the kind of traveler I am. And there was a huge queue. I'm very, very early for my flight. I know where they're going to do the check-in. I'm standing behind about 3 flights worth of check-in, huge winding queue. Uh, and I think might as well be in the queue. I've got nothing else to do. And I'm right at the very end of that queue. There's about 300 people in front of me. And I just kind of nudge along and nudge along and nudge along. And I finally get to the end of the queue. And I see the the person doing the check-in, this lady doing the check-in and her colleagues doing check-in as well. And I come in front of her and she's browbeaten, she's tired. And the first thing I said to her was, I'm super early. I'm on this flight. Do you want to have a break and I'll come back? And she said, no, no, no. She said, that's fine. She looked at the time. She said, yeah, I can check you in. That's not a problem at all. And I said, well, thanks. I appreciate it. Then I can go through security and go put my feet up. Are you going to get a chance to have a break at all, or is there another huge wave coming? Because I was at the airport at peak time. And she said, no, I'm going to get a break shortly. And I said, well, my offer's still there. If you want to have a break, I'm happy to wait. And she said, no, no, thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's just being human, just being decent to each other, thinking about the other person. No superpower here. And I w was thinking about the flight that I had ahead, and I wanted to prepare for the workshop, and I wanted to be at my A game, and I was going to have about 14 hours worth of concentration on it. I wasn't going to sleep on that flight. I just wanted to prepare and really get my thoughts crisp. I'd be ready to run that workshop, which was occurring in about 24 hours-ish time. So I was going to fly and get a little bit of sleep, and then I had to be back up on my feet and had to be ready. So this was really important to me. That's what I was going to do. And I was not looking forward to the fact I was going to be jammed in a plane and probably in a single seat, sardine fashion. I was flying cattle class, as we call it in Australia, economy anywhere else. And so she got talking to me and she said, "You going to Los Angeles? Is a business or a holiday or seeing family?" And I said, it's actually more business and catching up with a friend, and this is what I'm going to go and do. And she said, that's really cool. And she said, and with NASA, yeah, that's amazing. What kind of team are you working with? And I thought, it's really unusual to be asked that. And so I told her a little bit about what we were doing as well. And I said, thank you for showing an interest, especially when you've dealt with 300 plus people as well. That's really excellent customer service. Look, I don't know if it's possible, but if there's any chance to have, I've got a long flight ahead, as you know. I'm a bit nervous about this workshop and I'm really focused in on preparing properly. Is there any chance that there might be a seat, a spare seat beside me where I can put stuff and then I can spread out a little bit and work on this? And she said, looked up at the system and she said, how'd you like a whole row to yourself? Yes, please. And that was just from a place of thinking about the need and the service around that. Um, and she couldn't have done that if that was a fully booked flight, and I didn't expect her to do that. But the mere fact that she wanted to do that to help, I really appreciated. And this is I took inspiration from a similar tale for Dee about that. I didn't do it to get myself an upgrade or a flight. That's really important. This was authentic. I did it because I gave two hoots about the person who'd been standing for a couple of hours servicing 300 anxious people, because most people are anxious when they're going on an international flight and they want to get there and get their bags in and then just chill, get on the plane and then they're fine. Just started by thinking about that person's circumstance. I think that's the story you're referring to,
Yeah,
Charlie.
exactly, because she felt appreciated and included.
Yeah, because she was.
Yep, that's right.
I have seen people try to do authentic appreciation to get their way.
Doesn't
It
work.
never doesn't work. It doesn't ring
Work.
true. People get a smell of it, like
That's
say when
right. That's
somebody
right.
burns toast.
It's got to be
Yeah,
real. Then it's the secret sauce. Yeah,
yep,
and
that's right.
that's all about mindset. That's what you're describing.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. If you
You're
don't have
actually
that mindset, don't try it.
you're
If you're
actually
not
talking,
grateful, don't try it.
you're actually talking about AMBR.
Yeah, I am. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. My attention was on her experience. My mindset was about, you know, is there a way I can give her a little bit of energy back in the day?
Yep.
She's
Yep.
just had a really hard slog about that. Of course, the behavior shifted from me by what I chose to engage on. And the result, I didn't know, the result was that she had a better day. The result wasn't that I got an upgrade or an
Yep.
extra leg room.
Exactly. Exactly. Well said.
So
Thank you.
you're right, and thank you. And from a from the same place of gratitude, Charlie and Nick, thank you for talking with me and for this opportunity to share my
That's
experience about
beautiful.
that. And to anybody who's listening or watching this, thank you for taking the time. I'd love to hear your experiences and your views. We all learn from each other. Please do reach out. Charlie, I'll
It's
return the mic to yourself, if I may.
just so good to tag up with you again, Sharpie. You and I have spent a lot of time together and had
Yeah, we have.
a whole mixture of experiences together, and it's always been a total pleasure to work with you and be with you in Savannah, and
Yeah,
one of
likewise.
your most special people.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I sit in good company, and particularly on this call, and our old mate here, Nico, as well. Old in terms of duration, not age, Nico. We
Beautiful.
go
Good
back away now.
memories,
Good memories
excellent
indeed.
memories, life-changing memories.
Yeah, yeah,
The
exactly right.
cause and the friendship, the after hours, good times we had. There was something
Indeed.
special about that group and the impact in my life. And I can
Yeah,
just assure you guys that I'm every day applying the principles that I've learned. I can actually make more of it. Uh, but yeah, maybe I can make more of it always,
yep,
but it's playing a huge role in what I'm doing. That's all I can
yeah.
say.
And likewise. Absolutely likewise too, my friend. Well, gentlemen, we're at the top of the hour. I'm happy to keep talking, but I'm mindful of Nico. You've got to get some rest, and Charlie, I'm sure you got
Well,
other things in your
I
day too.
I think this has been an amazing session, and I'm ready to just stop right now.
That sounds like a good place to stop, and we'll catch up another time, gentlemen.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful to be with you again. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care, my
Take
friends.
care, Mr.
Lovely
Sharp.
talking with you.
We could talk
All the best.
we could talk all night if we let ourselves. So let's just move on and make this digestible for other folks.
That's a good plan. Thank you. Take care. And thanks everybody for watching too.
I'm
All the
gonna
best.
I'm